season for the commission, and we're going to be hearing from Dr. Dow in a little while about all of the work that the agency has done in the implementation of House Bill 1244. I know that the agency is also hard at work getting ready for the upcoming financial aid season, also following up on the very successful Student Success Summit that the agency held with leadership from higher education last month. So kudos to everyone involved with that. And I know the agency is also going to be moving offices soon. So there's a lot going on at MHEC, and I will turn it over to our secretary, Secretary Rai.
Thank you, Chair Moss, and good morning, everyone. We are also anxiously waiting for our winter break a little bit, where we'll take maybe a few days time off. I'll be taking some time off. I'll be traveling with my family, and I hope everyone takes some time off and relaxes before the fun starts in January. As we close this year, I want to take a moment to reflect on significant strides that we have made in advancing higher education across the state of Maryland. The support of Moore Miller administration has enabled the Maryland Higher Education Commission to fulfill key goals outlined both internally and also legislatively. You will hear some update on House Bill 1244 today, but there are other bills also where we are diligently responding to every ask there. Together, we have reaffirmed our commitment to ensuring that every student has access to the quality education and resources they need to thrive in an evolving world. I would like to share just few highlights. Chair Moss almost listed everything there, but we have expanded the scholarship programs, allowing thousands of students to attend college without the burden of overwhelming debt. We have increased outreach to ensure that community college students are informed about expanded access to promised scholarship funding for non-credit and certificate programs. We are partnering with our colleagues in Department of Labor and Commerce to improve cross-collaboration and address industry and workforce needs. Expanded apprenticeships and paid internships, allowing students to gain hands-on experience while pursuing their degrees. Today, you will hear a presentation on Baltimore Cyber Range, how this range will be created at all 16 community colleges. Howard Community College has already created this range. This gives experiential learning opportunities to all cybersecurity students at our community colleges that will make them more employable. At the same time, it will give our state a competitive advantage in making Maryland cybersecurity capital of the nation. We are also addressing barriers to education by investing in programs that support first-generation college students, students of color, and students from underrepresented communities. We are continuing to move forward with creating draft post-2025 goals intended to eliminate achievement gaps, increase degree completion, ensure students earn meaningful credentials, and create research and innovation-based paths to success. We hosted and empowered higher education institutions across Maryland to reflect on their capabilities and their roles in building a future that meets post-secondary education needs. While we are proud of our accomplishments, we recognize that there is still much more work to be done. As we enter the new year, our focus will be on expanding dual enrollment and early college programs to give high school students a head start, strengthening community colleges as gateways to both higher education and high demand careers, leveraging technology to make learning more accessible and engaging for all our students. Our investments in higher education are investments in the future of Maryland. By prioritizing higher education, we are not only shaping the lives of individual students, but also driving innovation, economic growth, and community resilience. Thank you to our faculty, administrators, industry partners, and policymakers for your tireless dedication. Most importantly, thank you to our students who inspire us every day with their passion, strength, and determination. Together, we are building a brighter future for everyone. Thank you, Chair Marks. I give you the meeting back.
Thank you, Secretary Rai. We have been joined by a couple more of our fellow commissioners. Commissioner Williams is on, and Commissioner Tabor Stalen is on via audio. Truly a trooper because she's feeling under the weather, but she's still joining by phone. So that gives us seven commissioners, which is a quorum for our commission of 12. So I think we are in a position to review the minutes from our October meeting. Do we have a motion with respect to approving the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second the motion.
All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. The minutes have been unanimously approved. Thank you. We will now move on to our next agenda item, which is a presentation by BCR Cyber and the Maryland Association of Community Colleges.
Thank you very much, and we certainly appreciate the time, and we certainly appreciate the good work that the commission does. I'm Bruce Spector. I'm the chairman of BCR, which is known as Baltimore Cyber Range, and we also have Monica Randall, who's the deputy director of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges. We're going to break up our presentation. I'm going to give you an introduction, and then we'll answer any questions that you may have. BCR Cyber, the Baltimore Cyber Range, actually was founded back in 2017, and it was an offshoot of the state of Maryland's economic mission to Israel. And I know we have a lot of educators on the call, and so there's probably a fair amount of artists and poets and non-technical types. So I just want to tell you what the range is and how it came about. The Israelis see a lot of nasty stuff over there. They've got a lot of hostility. So what they do that's quite clever is they actually take those threats, store the threats, catalog those threats, create what they call an attack generator, and then they take the attack generator and they run it on a simulated network, and they teach their cyber warriors how to detect, mitigate, and remediate that threat. That is what a cyber range is. So we took that system, we were a bunch of defense contractors, and we put it in Baltimore, and we didn't think about the cyber warrior aspect. The focus was on workforce development. As you can see from the slide, that we've got confirmation. Currently, there's about 30,000 unfilled positions in the state of Maryland. These are not jobs that need to be created. They just need to be filled. So what we did is we received an EARN grant. I'm sure most of you or some of you know what that is. Can you go to the next slide? And we took our consortium of contractors, primarily government contractors, but not only, and we thought about how we would use that range. And our idea was to approach the community colleges and see if we could talk to each of the schools and perhaps train all the faculty on the state's nickel, and then teach them how the range operates. And then each year, each school would send us 5 of their students. And we started that in 2017, and each school sent us 5 each year. And we actually, based upon the training that the employers gave us, they actually got jobs. So the first grant was 90 students, and we got 80 jobs. And the way EARN works, if you get 80%, they give you another grant. So we did about 20 grants over that 5-year period, and we trained about 2,000 people. We got 1,800 trained. We're very, not only proud of that, but very proud of the diversity factors, which is a real function of the community colleges. 68% of our employed were people of color, and over 50% were women, which are numbers that are much larger than the ecosystem here in the United States. So with that, can we go to the next slide, Monica, please? Mm-hmm. We talked with the state, and the state saw the success, and to make a long story short, we decided to take the range we had in Baltimore, and we're going to put it in all 16 schools. And we're going to let Monica talk more to that in a second. And I just want to say that the reason we have been successful to date is because of the community college participation. We have taken professors from the schools, made them curators. They were able to pedagogically correct the vocational training that our employers offered, and it was received very well by our students. And those students, in turn, were able to interview with our employers, and they were able to meaningfully explain what their knowledge was and how well it worked for getting them jobs. So, Monica, I'm going to hand it off to you from here.
Sure. Thanks, Bruce. As was mentioned, our goal, of course, through the Maryland Association of Community Colleges is to establish these regional training centers in each one of our 16 community colleges. So to do that, we have to talk about, funding, how we went about partnering with BCR Cyber and how all of these are funded. I think it's best to sort of think about this project in two different phases. The first phase, of course, being the infrastructure, the ranges that Bruce talked about, developing that infrastructure, those servers and the computers and the things that you need to have, the infrastructure to train people. And the second part is the workforce development. So to do this, we at MAC, as we partnered with BCR Cyber, we started out by getting a $2 million earmark from our congressional delegation. And we were able to use those funds to leverage funding from an Edwards grant as well as a Commerce grant. So an additional like 1.5 million. So we used the $2 million earmark as well as the funding from the state to help on the infrastructure side of the house, the servers and those cyber ranges that Bruce talked about. Just a few weeks ago, we were awarded another set of funds, this time to work on the workforce development side, to actually help train the trainers, to help train students. So we received from TIF, the Talent Innovation Fund, a Department of Labor grant, about $1.8 million. Through that grant, not only are we partnering with BCR Cyber to implement this project, but that grant also gives us the opportunity to partner with the Maryland Workforce Association. The workforce boards, they will provide or help us provide wraparound services for our students, as well as help us develop a registered apprenticeship program. So to date, we have raised about $5.4 million for this project. Our timeline is very short in terms of our goal is to have all of the ranges installed at all 16 of our community colleges by April. Right now it's December. We're busy. BCR Cyber is busy in the process of meeting with our community college folks and having those meetings and doing the installation. January and February, we'll continue to install at each one of the community colleges. And in March, begin to train the trainer with the goal, of course, of having all of the cyber ranges ready for implementation and train the workforce by April of 2025. This is a very exciting project for us here at MAC. We're learning a lot. I've been learning a lot about cybersecurity and quantum and all kinds of things. But we see this as really key to helping when it comes to the cyber workforce that we need here in Maryland, and really being a model for cyber security workforce development, not only for the state, but we're hoping to even be a model nationally with this project. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have as well. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone.
Any questions from commissioners? Very impressive. Dr. Rye?
Well, I can thank Bruce and Monica and Brad Stewart, who is not here, for bringing this significant opportunity here. This makes our cybersecurity programs that are at 16 community colleges. We have at least a couple of thousand students in those programs, and they will become probably uniquely trained in the country. It doesn't get any better than that, because these are real threats, simulations available to students while they are pursuing their associate degree. So again, 30,000 number of unfilled jobs keeps changing. But we also know that nationally, we have 500,000 jobs available. And employers are looking for graduates who have experiential learning, real skills. So while this is a wonderful for cybersecurity, but this is also model for other programs. How to embed experiential learning in other programs so students are work ready. Again, Maryland is unique. Employers that are out there come to Maryland. Don't take our students away. Bring your businesses here, because this is talent-rich state. We have unique talent in this state. I see Commissioner Burnham has a question.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. That's a fascinating story of success, I think. I'd like for you to explain just one more time what a range is, so that I can better understand how you're seeking to establish a range for each of the 16 community colleges. And then I would also like to know how long the training that's taking place at the community colleges, how long that takes.
Monica, can I take that?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And let me start by, at the top level, maybe the best way to think about a cyber range would be the way you might think of a flight simulator to a pilot learning how to fly. It gives you a qualitative understanding of the entire process. The training is not laboratory based. We call it scenario based. So as an example, we pick a threat, ransomware. We introduce ransomware to an enterprise network. We then see how a secure operating center would detect, mitigate, and remediate that threat using very sophisticated tools that those employers told us are the right ones to use. As an example, the heart of any secure operating center is called the SIEM, it's the System Information Event Manager. The US government almost standardized on the Cisco Splunk system. So our range uses that SIM. The threats that we have are given to us by the employers. What is Maryland seeing? Is it ransomware? Is it denial of service? Those threats are what we're teaching our students to deal with. And that while those threats are taking place, our employers are actually observing their prospective hires on the range. We have observation stations. We call it the NFL training combine. It's like you can actually see them in operation, but it's worked from the standpoint of getting a very good match during the interviewing process. And that ability has allowed us to really be able to place the trainees into the work position. Does that give you a better?
That helps a great deal. Thank you.
Sure. And then to answer your second part of your question, the training is extensive. And what I mean by that is cybersecurity to us, particularly incident response, is an esoteric subset of IT. You have to understand IT before you can really become a cyber person. That's from our perspective. So we need to teach proficiency in IT, and our employers say that certifications like A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, that leads to the basic levels of proficiency that you could then go on the range. The range is then, we use the employers to tell us what vocationally is hot right now. Is it ransomware? Is it denial of service? Is it web defacement? And that training can go anywhere from 80 hours to 6 months. And it just depends on how much the student wants to get involved and what program each college wants to dedicate to.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from the commission? All right. Oh, yes, Dr. Rai?
So, Bruce and Monica, how can we help you?
Wow. Bruce?
Yeah, Sanjay, I can tell you categorically, getting the academic folks at the community colleges energized about the potential. And what I mean by that is this is not just for credit, this is for non-credit as well. We envision, as an example, the MAC has an IT focus group that looks at the IT issues. There's curriculum fraud through their systems, there's financial fraud through their systems. the community college can use these ranges to attack those problems and teach their IT how to work with that, can teach local government. We want this to be a true accelerator for the ecosystem in Maryland. And at the heart of that is going to be to get that faculty really energized and understanding how these things operate. That's crucial to the success of the project.
Wonderful. And we will also need help in getting faculty from the industry on our community college campuses. So we can look at this from both sides. Very, very happy to work with you. And we will do everything we can to support this program.
And so far, Sanjay, the MAC and the Maryland Association of Community Colleges have been phenomenally cooperative, and we owe our success greatly to MAC's work and how we've worked with the schools themselves.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Spector, thank you. I'm sorry, Dr. Randall, did you have something?
Oh, no, other than in addition to the faculty, I think getting the word out to students and letting them know of this type of opportunity in the state, I think that's so important. And that's something that we're going to be working on as we move forward, just getting, students, letting them know that this is a great opportunity for training, for advancement, for working here in Maryland, et cetera, as well. I think that's going to be key to our success.
Excellent. Well, Mr. Spector, thank you for your innovation. Thank you for including all of Maryland students. And Dr. Randall, thank you for your participation through MAC, through this initiative, and for all you do at MAC. We appreciate both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful holiday.
You too.
Thank you.
Happy, healthy.
Bye-bye.
Next on the agenda are some sizable updates on House Bill 1244. I assume Dr. Dow will be leading the discussion?
Yes,
Dr.
Chairman.
Dow?
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Mott, Secretary Rye, and fellow commissioners. I am pleased to provide some updates to you all on where we are with implementing House Bill 1244. So let me get my screen sharing. So not only am I going to provide updates in this presentation, but this is also an opportunity for you all to give us feedback on some proposed plans and next steps. So I am happy to take questions throughout the presentation. I do have a second screen, but I may not see your hand. So please just jump in if I don't see that your hand is raised. So let's get going. You might remember back in June, we did a summary of what House Bill 1244 would require us, and this is the exact slide that we used in that June presentation. So nine initiatives through House Bill 1244. Let me walk you through what we've done so far. I'm pleased to share that we've completed 3 of those tasks. We've made revisions to the review meeting process. We've made revisions to the definition of substantial modification, and we have established the Program Review Process Advisory Council. Those items look very simple when you just see them on the screen, but as you all know, through these commission meetings, this has been an iterative process, particularly for the substantial modification revisions. The Program Review Process Advisory Council needed bylaws to be set up. We've convened that group once, and that consists of primarily provosts and presidents, and so scheduling has been a little bit of a challenge. So these have been pretty heavy lifts, and I'm pleased to share that we have made significant progress on these items. Similarly, we have a couple of items that we are like 95% complete on. So I fully expect us to have these completed towards the end of this month, if not by the end of January. One is creating an administrative procedures guide. We have that drafted internally, and it's under internal review. And then the statewide workforce need and emerging field analysis, more to come on that. Finally, or not finally, we do have a few items that are in progress that will carry over into 2025. This is the standards for the analysis of unreasonable duplication and unnecessary duplication, the letters of intent for new graduate programs, and mission statement review for public institutions. So these are active items that are in progress and will continue into 2025 and will continue to provide updates. And then finally, there are 2 items that will not start until probably mid-2025. One of them is the harm analysis. That is not required to start until 2025. And the process for fully online program, once we get through unreasonable duplication, unnecessary duplication, letters of intent, we'll transition into a process for fully online program. So that is where we are in terms of implementation. Today, I'd like to focus on 3 of these items: the statewide workforce need analysis, the letters of intent, and mission statement review. Questions, comments, concerns before I hop into workforce need? Okay, moving on. As a reminder, we've talked about this a couple of times in past commission meetings, but to refresh your memory, we are developing 4 appendices for the statute, 4 appendices that identify occupations and academic programs in 2 specific contexts. One is in-demand occupation, and then relatedly in-demand academic programs that align to those in-demand occupations. So Appendix A and B are connected. Then appendices C and D deal with emerging workforce needs. C is a list of emerging workforce needs. We'll talk a little bit about how we've defined that. And D is a list of emerging workforce need programs as defined by the legislature. So 4 appendices that are near complete at this point. I want to re-emphasize that this is going to be updated annually. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, I've identified what that cycle is going to look like. So in January, the commission would approve and release the appendices. Between January and June, there would be significant discussion about workforce need with a variety of organizations, such as licensing boards, sister agencies, certainly our colleges and universities. And we would update our process based on that feedback. We would provide an update to the commission at the June meeting. July through August, we would draft new lists. September through October, we would circulate those lists, garner feedback, again, provide an update to the commission, and then November, December, revise the list based on feedback so that we can get approval, ideally in December, but for now, we're going to work in a January start frame. So that's what we're looking at in terms of updates over the 2025 calendar year. So our goal is to come back to you all in January with final lists, which would be the first version of these appendices in 2020. So let me walk you through each appendix, the process, some highlights, and some limitations. So Appendix A, we source this from 2 primary sources, the Maryland Workforce Exchange data and occupational projections from the Maryland Department of Labor. We have 3, really 2 inclusion criteria, but there's a sub-bullet for the second one. One is occupations requiring more than a high school diploma. So we are including occupations that require some college no degree, that require a post-secondary credential, as well as occupations requiring associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, graduate, and so on and so forth. So any occupation requiring more than a high school diploma is included in this analysis. Then it's either occupations with more than 1,000 new job postings in the Maryland Workforce Exchange, or occupations with more than 1,000 total new openings between 2022 and 2023, based on the occupational projection. So when we do this analysis, we narrow it down to 208 occupations identified as in demand based on this inclusion criteria. Questions so far? Comments, concerns? Okay. So 208 occupations. This appendix will literally just list those occupations. That's what this appendix will look like. It'll be, I think, about 4 to 5 pages identifying those occupations and the inclusion criteria that dot that occupation onto the list. There are, of course, some limitations to this methodology, and want to state that explicitly. This is clearly primarily a quantitative analysis. It does not recognize recent workforce needs reports on specific industries. So, for example, the Maryland Healthcare Commission, a legislatively mandated commission, just recently released a report on workforce needs and identifying appropriate academic programs. When we go back to our schedule, that January to June timeframe, we would be looking at these kinds of reports to inform the next iteration of the list. So we recognize that this first round of the list is primarily quantitative, and that there's a lot of other information that we could be sourcing to identify in-demand occupations. We, of course, recognize that the occupation codes have not been updated since 2018, and there have been a number of burgeoning fields, a number of new occupations that exist out there. This is honestly the best metric that we can use to identify occupations at this time, and we'll lean on this until we can find a better solution. And then finally, the law requires us to focus on state and regional workforce needs. We recognize that there may be in-demand occupations at a national level or even at a global level, but the law requires us to focus on Maryland's in-demand occupations and to focus on regional workforce needs. The next iteration will attempt a regional analysis, and we'll work on that in 2025 as well. Questions, comments before I hop over to Appendix B?
Yes.
Okay.
Dr.
Yes, please.
The occupational code updates, is that done by the Department of Labor?
Correct. It's either Department of Labor or Bureau of Labor Statistics as well. And I think BLS lives in U.S. Department of Labor, but it's a federal categorization.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Burnham. Okay, Appendix B, in-demand academic programs. And let me walk you through the process of how we've developed this list. We have used two primary sources, our Maryland Academic Program Inventory, often shorthand API, as well as our MHEC degree trend file. Our academic program inventory is limited to credit-bearing programs at our in-state institutions. It identifies all of the academic programs that we have approved over the years, and actually in the PDF version that you can find on our website, it also includes programs that have been discontinued. It identifies statewide designations. It provides a pretty in-depth detailed information about the academic programs offered in Maryland. Then we also get every year from the colleges and universities the number of degrees awarded for each of those programs. So we have sourced information from that degree trend file to inform this Appendix B. As you might remember, there is a crosswalk developed in conjunction between Department of Labor and U.S. Department of Education at the federal level that takes occupational codes and crosswalks it with our classification instructional program, SIP code. So there is a SIP stock crosswalk that exists. And so we took all of those occupational codes and aligned them with our SIP codes through our academic program inventory. So we included academic programs at the typical education level noted by BLS and academic programs that have not been discontinued. So in other words, we've eliminated any academic programs that have been discontinued. It's important to note that because some programs have been discontinued in recent years, and may have had graduates in 2018, 2019, 2020, but that program has since been discontinued and is not part of this analysis. When we do this, remember 208 occupations, more than 1,900 current academic programs are offered that align with those in-demand occupations. So we have quite a few programs out there that have existing enrollment, existing degree production that are aligned with those in-demand occupations. We have also included in this list zip codes in which there are no academic programs at that typical education level. So I'm going to pop out of my slideshow here and share my screen and show a little bit an example of what this would look like. 2 seconds, reshare my screen. So this is the analysis for market research analysts and marketing specialists. BLS says that the typical degree for this occupation is a bachelor's degree. And per the projection, there are almost 1,800 average annual openings each year in Maryland. We look at our current academic programs and their zip codes. So these are all the various zip codes that lead into this occupation, market research analyst. And so you can see business analytics, a general marketing degree, tourism promotion operations, hospitality and recreation marketing operations. All of these types of programs per that crosswalk lead into market research analyst or marketing specialist occupation. We then identified how many programs we have for that zip code. So if we look at business analytics, we have 1 program in business analytics. And then the following columns identify how many students or how many degrees have been awarded each year for that zip code. So if we look at a general marketing degree or program, we have 8, and the total number of degrees offered in sum for all 8 of those programs. You can see we have zip codes where we do not have programs in which could lead into that marketing specialist or market research and analyst. Let me just give you another example of what this looks like for graphic designers. In-demand occupation. Let me zoom back out there. Per labor projection, 396 average annual openings each year. These are all the zip codes that lead into a graphic designer occupation. These are the number of programs offered for that zip code at the bachelor's degree level. And this is the following columns are the number of degrees awarded for each year for the past 5 years. Okay, Commissioner Howe, I see your hand raised. Let me stop there.
I do. Is there a standardized definition and description of each of these courses so that you know you're comparing apples to apples and what's available?
Absolutely. So when an institution proposes a new program, they select a zip code. Yes, there is a description, a definition of what that program is supposed to be doing. They choose a zip code that seems best aligned with their programmatic outcomes. So institutions choose this. Sometimes we will make a recommendation for a different zip code, just depending on what they're trying to offer. But at the end of the day, it is up to the institution to choose the code that best matches their academic program.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Questions on any of this before I move back to my slide deck? So this is what this is what Appendix B will likely look like. Each occupation will get its own page. And you can the point of including the number of these last 5 columns is to give context of how many degrees we are awarding each year at this degree level in comparison to the average annual opening. So again, 396 annual average openings for graphic designers. We're about 150 less than where we are meeting that mark per the data that we have access to right now. Okay, let me stop sharing and get back over to my PowerPoint. Sorry, takes me a minute. There we go. Okay, so we went through the process. Let me talk through limitations. Similar limitations that we have to Appendix B. One academic program can lead to multiple occupations. So I am a little cautious. Commissioner Agu had talked in an earlier meeting about coming up with a delta. We're hesitant to move forward with calculating that because one academic program can lead to multiple occupations. So we're going to have to think through that. That's a challenge we can try to solve in the next iteration. But at minimum, we have included the number of degrees awarded to give that context. Second, there may be additional academic programs beyond the typical education level. So in the example that I just gave you with graphic design, the typical education level per BLS is bachelor's degree. The columns that you saw for that table does not include programs at the master's or graduate level. We have only included academic programs at that typical education level. Third, the list does not include non-degree programs. So back to the limitation of our academic program inventory, it only includes credit-bearing programs at our in-state degree granting institutions. So it does not include the non-credit programs primarily offered at our community colleges. It does not recognize the programs offered at our private career schools, and it does not include out-of-state institutions operating in Maryland who may be contributing to the workforce. So again, these are limitations that we will have to address in a future iteration. Commissioner Thompson.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Dow, for your presentation thus far. Regarding your third bullet, your information does not include out-of-state institutions operating within the state of Maryland. Are they captured or will they be captured somewhere else, like in the regional type of analysis? And could you define what our region is for the purposes of your study? Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. So we're going to have to work with the out-of-state institutions to refine their annual reporting. We do get the number of students in aggregate from the out-of-state institutions of how many students completed their programs of study. But we need to refine that. So we're going to need to do some work with our out-of-state institutions to streamline that reporting and what that looks like so that we can start including it in the analysis. It's the same thing with our non-degree programs at the non-credit at our community colleges, as well as the private career schools. We're going to have to work on some refined data collections over the next couple of years to include those programs in this analysis. So for example, hairdressers are an in-demand occupation. When we pull up our academic program inventory, we do not have any credit-bearing programs that lead to a hairdresser occupation. However, we absolutely know we have cosmetology programs throughout the state, both at our community colleges and at our private career schools. So that's going to be a limitation. It's going to look like we're not producing students in some of those fields, and we're going to have to footnote that heavily to give that context. That it's a data limitation, not a true reflection of the programs that we have existing in Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Then your question on region. I am quickly realizing that people interpret the term region differently. So we're going to have some conversations about what we mean by region. There's one interpretation to talk about regions within the state. So Baltimore City, Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, Greater DC, those could be considered regional needs. What we need in the Greater DC area for workforce is going to be different than the need on the Eastern Shore or in Western Maryland. That is one interpretation of region. There is another interpretation of region to contextualize Maryland within the 95 corridor, that we are closely connected between DC, Philadelphia, and New York, and that there are larger multi-state regional workforce needs that do not recognize state boundaries. So we're going to need to go back and think through. In particular, I think we need to talk with some folks in the legislature to better understand what they meant by region, to get clarity on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And if there, I mean, as commissioners, if you all have thoughts about where we go in the in defining or operationalizing region, certainly open to your feedback. Okay. Moving on to Appendix C then. Any other questions, comments? Okay, Appendix C. So Appendix A and B focused on in-demand workforce needs. Appendix C focuses on emerging workforce needs. You might remember from a previous commission meeting, we, in consultation with Department of Labor, we are operationalizing workforce need by leveraging a methodology called a location quotient. So we are only using information from the occupational projections from Department of Labor. Our inclusion criteria, again, is one is occupations requiring more than a high school diploma, and two, occupations in which the location quotient is equal to or less than 1. This location quotient measures how concentrated an occupation is in Maryland. It is calculated by the percent of Maryland's workforce in a given occupation divided by the percent of the national workforce in that occupation. It is a density measure of how many people are working in that occupation for Maryland compared to a national context. When we use location quotient, we identify 163 occupations through this measure. And then when we cross-reference, just for fun, if we cross-reference those 163 occupations in Appendix C with that in-demand list in Appendix A, there are 62 occupations that are both emerging and in demand. Appendix C will only include the 163 occupations, but we will likely identify the occupations that are found in both A and C for reference. And again, this is going to simply look like a list. I won't share my screen on that, but it'll just be a list of those occupations and the location quotient variable. Yeah, Commissioner Williams.
Hey, Dr. Dow, thank you so much. This is really a helpful presentation. I wonder if you've covered this territory before, but how does our approach compare with other states and their methodology? And how do our findings for emerging workforce needs compare with our surrounding states or competing markets?
Great question. So I have consulted with a couple of other states on what they do in this world, and it's the higher education partner who I have been in touch with. So this is not to say that other departments of labor, they may have similar, but I've only been able to source information from an MHEC equivalent or system-wide equivalent. So take this all with a grain of salt. My understanding is not many states do this kind of analysis for the purposes of academic program development. The whole reason why we are doing this work is to better inform our colleges and universities on the types of programs that the state is really in need for. So if there has been analysis, it's been limited, and only a few states do an in-demand analysis, not necessarily an emerging analysis. So for example, Ohio, they do a similar analysis for in-demand. They leverage occupational projections from their Maryland Department of Labor, use similar metrics in terms of cutoff, and then produce that list in terms of occupations and zip codes. To the best of my knowledge, at this point in time, I can do some additional work. I am not familiar with other states that are doing this idea of emerging workforce needs. Once we finalize these lists, there is a national conference with the state higher education executive offices, SHEO, and it would be great for me to present this at that conference in the summer to get feedback and see what other states are doing and what this looks like in that national context. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think we're fairly unique in developing this, and that we're mandated to update it each year. We have developed this in collaboration with Department of Labor and Department of Commerce. So they have been a part of all of this analysis and have been vetting what this process looks like. So it's not an isolated higher education analysis. But I would still want to consult with other states to see what they do. I'd like to finalize this list, finalize this process, and then talk with other states and get some reflection. Does that help?
Yeah, very much so. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so this is our emerging workforce needs analysis. This list will identify the 163 occupations. Again, similar limitations to Appendix A. It's a quantitative analysis. We need to do more work in identifying and connecting with industries. This is where our connection with Department of Commerce is going to be critical. We're going to have to do a lot of work in working with Commerce to connect with industry around emerging workforce needs. A second limitation, this operational definition using that location quotient, depends on a national context. And so it's just something to consider. Is that really where we need to be focusing? We could potentially revise that location quotient to talk about a regional need and contextualize Maryland within the Carolina up to the New York, Connecticut region. Something to consider, but as of right now, we depend on that national context for the denominator. And then third, again, it leverages projection data, which is dependent on the 2018 occupational code. So in this analysis, we're not really reflecting. I always lean on drone technology. Drone technology isn't necessarily reflected in these new occupational codes, but in the last 10 years, that is a burgeoning, emerging workforce need. So again, we're going to have to come back to this qualitative analysis, talking with industry and identifying occupations that may not be categorized in that in the 2018 occupational code. More work needs to be done on this. We definitely have a work cut out for us in 2025, but at least this gives us some groundwork on what is an emerging workforce need in the context of Maryland, with Maryland in the context of a national workforce analysis. Okay, on to Appendix D. We're getting through this. Thank you, everyone. Appendix D is an emerging workforce needs program list. Per House Bill 1244, there is a very specific definition of an emerging workforce need program. It means a graduate level program identified by the commission that no other institution of higher education in the state offers, addresses a job or industry need that is innovative, unique, and rare, and could leverage federal, state, or private resources on a long-term basis. An emerging workforce need does not mean a specific academic program identified by the commission to fulfill or support an identified current state and regional workforce. So what this means is the academic programs that we identify on Appendix C has to be graduate, has to be no other university offers it, addresses a job or industry need that is innovative, unique, and rare, and is not on Appendix C. or I'm sorry, Appendix B. So there's a little bit more work that we need to do for Appendix D. Again, we are going to source from our two primary sources, the academic program inventory, as well as our degree trend file. We're going to use that federal SIP-SOC crosswalk. So back to the 168 occupations identified in Appendix B, we're going to crosswalk that with our existing programs. And so this time we're going to identify SIP codes not currently offered at the graduate level in Maryland that align with occupations identified in Appendix B and are not identified in Appendix A. So Appendix C depends on C, B, and in many ways A. If we do this analysis, we come up with 86 unique zip codes. So these are 86 potentially emerging workforce need programs in which no college or university is offering in Maryland, is for an occupation that requires a graduate degree, and is potentially innovative, unique, and of course could leverage federal or state resources. So that is Appendix D. Appendix D will literally list the occupations and the zip codes in which we have no program for that zip code at the graduate level. Certainly some limitations, again, depends on that SIP-SOC crosswalk and the operational definition of emerging occupation. Per our statutory definition, it is limited to graduate programs. So when we look at Appendix B, there are, of course, emerging workforce needs at the undergraduate and post-secondary credential level. But Appendix C, per that definition, is only limited to graduate programs. So let me walk you through our next steps and just see if you have any additional questions, thoughts, things to suggest, ideas. We are near ready to release these drafts. So ideally by the end of this week, we will release the draft list for public comment. We are obligated to send these lists to the Legislative Policy Committee at the General Assembly for their comments and feedback. So we will do that again, likely by the end of this week. We will release the list to our campus presidents and our segmental leadership for their input, and certainly to our program review colleagues at the colleges and universities. We'll likely give them to beginning of January, mid-January, to provide feedback. We're going to post this up on our website, make it clear that these are the draft lists. We're going to post a survey for people to provide feedback through. And in particular, we're looking for feedback on the methodology, as well as did we miss something? Is there a program not listed? Is there an occupation not listed? And get feedback through that survey. We certainly need to meet with the Advisory Council on Workforce Need to gain their feedback. So we'll do that hopefully in early January. We're going to review comments. We'll make any major changes. So if there's a glaring change that we're like, oh yeah, we missed a big thing, we'll make that change for the 2025 appendices. And then we'll also consider changes to make for the next iteration in 2026, whether that's a methodological change, inclusion of a new data source, and the like. So we'll review all those comments and consider two different types of changes. And then finally, we're going to prepare the list for final adoption at the January 22nd commission meeting. So we're going to be coming back to you all January 22nd with these lists for final adoption as the 2025 appendices to the state plan. Questions on any of this? I know that was a lot, but hopefully easy to understand, clear, and I'm happy to answer questions before we move on to the next topic. Yes, Commissioner Band.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this together and reviewing it. It's been incredibly helpful to see the bigger picture as you've worked through this process. So my question really is about, in January, we're going to be adopting this. So I want to go back to your next step, the first bullet. Can you help me understand where this program review advisory council fits in? Is that what you're calling program review colleagues? And can you talk a little bit more about that role, since it's new and they seemingly are going to play a critical role in this process?
Absolutely. So the Program Review Process Advisory Council is meant to talk about the process for program review initiatives. So they are reviewing issues. So our first meeting focused on a discussion of the analysis for unreasonable duplication and unnecessary duplication. We could certainly, if that is your recommendation, that we put this forward to the Program Review Process Advisory Council for their input. We can certainly do that, but there is this other advisory council, this Advisory Council on Workforce Needs, that seems better situated to provide feedback. This Advisory Council on Workforce Need is legislatively mandated. It comprises both higher education representatives as well as very specific industry partners. So they really can provide input on the analysis of workforce need as well as potentially areas that we are missing. In comparison to the Program Review Process Advisory Council, which is really looking at the program process, issues around program review processes. I don't know if I was clear, but I'm hoping that answered your question.
I do think that's very helpful to understand, and it seems, since this process, has been so clearly defined, that in my mind, having the Program Review Advisory Council very aware of and providing feedback about the appendices A through D would be something that would be very helpful. But I defer to other commissioners to see if they see the need that way as well.
Well, Commissioner Bands, I am happy to take your recommendation. I think what the only hesitation that I have is just scheduling a meeting. So at minimum, what I will make sure we do is the Program Review Process Advisory Council will get a dedicated email with all of these materials so that they can provide a feedback and input on this process and make sure that they have at least an opportunity to provide written feedback. If we are able to schedule a meeting before the January 22nd commission meeting, I can aim to do that so that we can have a discussion around these appendices as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Commissioner Burnham.
Thank you, Dr. Dow. I'd like to go back to the question you raised about the appropriate definitions you use for the regional analysis. I have two comments. First, I think both of those definitions that you described are important overall. I think my initial reaction, however, is that our focus probably would be better served to be inward looking more at regions within the state as opposed to those that would go up and down the 95 corridor or otherwise. That's important, but I think the federal government is better situated to do that and certainly would have the greater responsibility to do it. So I would urge us to focus inwardly. We minimize the risk of biting off more than we can chew, and we focus more specifically on what we can do within the state of Maryland.
I appreciate that feedback, Commissioner Burnham, and we will note that. We likely will come back to commissioners well before next June to talk through methodological changes for the 2026 version, in which case we will likely be either making a recommendation that this is how we define region or asking for some fuller discussion around that issue. So noted, and I will pencil you in for regional analysis within the state.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. And Chair Moss,
Yes,
I
go ahead.
just realized that I've been talking out of turn and have been calling on the commissioners myself.
Oh, no,
I
that's good.
apologize. I hope that's okay. Thank
Of
you.
course, no, not out of turn at all. I just wanted to concur with what Commissioner Ban said about trying to be as inclusive as possible, including with the program review process advisory committee. I mean, I really commend you, Dr. Dow, and your team for doing the meat of the work. And I think in the spirit of collaboration with all institutions of higher education for the benefit of Maryland students, I think we want as much input as possible from the institutions of higher education. And I agree with Commissioner Bands that a natural place to get that input would be the committee that the legislature established for this purpose, the Program Review Process Advisory Committee. So I see on your list, you're reviewing the draft list for public comment. I assume that's the public writ large, but I would make a particular effort to reach out to that committee.
We can do that. Noted. And I can report back. I guess my question is, so it is our goal that we have an actual meeting with the Advisory Council on Workforce Need. Will it be the expectation of the commission that we have a meeting with the Program Review Process Advisory Council before the January 22nd meeting?
I mean, I know, I think you should try to make it happen. I know that,
okay. Understood.
You know, schedules around the holidays are challenging, but I think that's important.
Understood.
And people can join, you can do it remotely, you know, people can make an effort to be there, but I think you should try to make that meeting happen.
Perfect. We can do that. Thank you. Okay. Okay. That is our workforce needs analysis overview. Are we ready to move on to our second topic, which is letters of intent, which I don't think will be as detailed. Okay, so let me jump right into it. Letters of intent for new graduate programs. For this part of the presentation, this is we are presenting a draft process for you all to give us feedback if you like it, don't like it, would want us to do it differently. This is something that will absolutely go to the Program Review Process Advisory Council for their input before we implement any specific processes. So this is you all giving us a first response to what we have pulled together. We'll adjust it and then present it to the Program Review Process Advisory Council. So recenter, back to House Bill 1244, beginning January 1st, 2025, public senior higher education institutions are required to submit a letter of intent for all new graduate programs the institution intends to propose within the 6-month to 2-year time period following the submission of a letter of intent. This stems from a recommendation from the legislative committee that met prior to last year's legislative session. It has become apparent, and as commissioners, you have probably realized, when an institution submits a proposal for a new program, it's kind of late in the game. It's the first time our agency is seeing that program. And the institution has they should have gone through all of their internal mechanisms before sending it to us. So they've garnered faculty input. They've met with their own internal industry advisory partners. They will have ideally gone to their own governing board for approval before submitting to us. And then they come to us and then we're like, oh, no, there's duplication or there's potential for collaboration. It's a little late in the game. So the letters of intent, it's a practice that many other states implement. The purpose of the letter of intent is legislatively mandated. We are supposed to use the letter of intent to facilitate collaboration between institutions and to provide feedback to an institution before the institution submits a program proposal, including any concerns regarding unreasonable or unnecessary program duplication. So this is supposed to be a little bit of an early warning sign. Hey, a college or university is thinking about a new graduate program. We would have the opportunity to review that, a draft version of that, and provide feedback. We are expected to circulate each letter of intent, but we are not supposed to post an institution's letter of intent publicly. There were concerns that, particularly for emerging or really novel fields, there is a bit of a national competition, particularly when we are in a highly bordered state, that putting that out publicly could potentially harm our Maryland institutions in developing those academic programs. So we are still supposed to circulate them to the higher education community, but not post. So here's what we're thinking for the potential sections of a letter of intent. And I realize there's a lot on your screen. Walk through these with me. Let me start at the bottom, because the last three potential sections, the reason why we are asking for that information is so that we can better understand opportunity for collaboration. We often hear the need for faculty as an opportunity for collaboration. We also understand, or we often hear dedicated infrastructure and facilities as a potential opportunity for collaboration. So we do want to understand the existing resources and any new resources an institution might need to have to implement that program. And then we can kind of take a statewide perspective and say, well, is there opportunity to collaborate with an institution that already has that resource? And what would that look like? And the last item is those external considerations, things that we need to know from the licensing board, national accreditors, or other approvals required for implementation that could impact a collaboration or the potential collaboration. So those are the last three, and that's why we would ask for that information. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the first 6 items really would give us information about duplication. It would give us some baseline information that would help us better understand and evaluate the potential program compared to existing programs. So certainly just some basic information, a draft program title, draft program description, intended implementation date, what the modality would be. We would want to know some, draft program details, those learning objectives, projected competency, skills, or intended employment, mission, how the program would align with the institutional mission, the need for the program. And then certainly we want to have the institutions do their own duplication analysis. How is the potential program distinct with similar programs in Maryland? Or is there preliminary evidence that the program will not be duplicative of another current program offered in the state? So we would really want the proposing institution to give us some of that initial analysis of what they're thinking that would distinguish the potential program from existing programs. And then finally, intended population, potential admissions requirements, or even prerequisite courses for enrollment in the program. So this is the bulk of what we're thinking. We do not want to make this a heavy exercise for institutions, but we do think that this is the requisite information that we would need to do that collaborative analysis and that initial duplication analysis for the purposes as outlined in House Bill 1244. Let me walk you through the process, what this would look like. So every 6 months or so, we would put out a call for letters of intent. We would receive those letters of intent as required by the law. We would circulate them. And then internally, our analysts would review for exactly that, concerns regarding potential duplication and opportunity for collaboration. We would then have a meeting with the proposing institution to review those concerns, offer suggestions, and discuss with campus leadership. At this level, we're thinking that discussion would be certainly with department chairs, deans, and with provosts. So it would be a robust discussion with institutional representation. After that meeting, we would provide a written response that reflects those concerns and opportunities, and we would provide that to the institution for their consideration before submitting a proposal. We do want to toe a careful line between recommending a change and discussing opportunities. Because certainly an institution could say, well, you recommended we do this thing. They submit the proposal and we still find duplication. So we're going to have to be careful about the language and terminology we use. But at least at a minimum, this gives the agency an early opportunity to present concerns to the institution as they're thinking about developing a new program. Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
Is there feedback between steps? For example, once the analyst reviews for concerns and provides an opportunity for the institution to reply, is there back and forth? I know you said there's a fine line between us making recommendations about exactly what to change or not. But I'm also wondering, is there a back and forth between once there's a written response and if the institution can go more in a circular motion? And I don't know where that line, where we stop. Where's that line? I think it's a wonderful opportunity, for the institution to get that feedback. I just don't know where it stops.
Absolutely. So I think what you're seeing on the screen is the minimum contact that we would have with the institution. And we would welcome the opportunity to have further discussion and continued collaboration between the agency and the institution as they develop their program. So I think we would welcome continued discussions beyond what you're seeing on the screen. Commissioner Howe.
So for me, this is the most difficult thing that I do as a member of this commission, because if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, maybe it's a goose. And there can be overlapping things, but not necessarily so duplicative that it is harmful to the other institution. So as much detail as we can get as commissioners about what the objection is in really explicit language, I think would be extremely helpful. And I appreciate the fact that you have an outline of a process here that would attempt to get that for us by the time it comes to the commission. So I thank you for this.
Sure, and I appreciate your analogy. It quacks and walks like a duck, but it's actually a goose. So I appreciate that. So this is just food for thought for you all to think through. Like I said, we wanted to give you an opportunity to reflect on this first. We will absolutely, this is the next topic for the Program Review Process Advisory Council to provide input on. So this might change depending on what we hear from the campuses in terms of this process, what the expectations are. If I may, I do want to go back to these potential sections. Commissioner Howe, I just heard you talk about the idea of harm and how maybe we would be able to capture that. We don't have that here in these potential sections, but it is an element, as you've noted, as part of the analysis. So we'll think on that and see how we can incorporate that either in the sections of the letter of intent or potentially in the analyst review of concerns for potential duplication.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
And Dr. Dow, by the same token, the second part of that analyst review, the opportunity for collaboration. I mean, I think all of us, well, I shouldn't speak for everyone, I'll speak for myself. I think I'm very interested in collaboration. I think the legislature, when they passed this bill, is interested in encouraging collaboration among institutions of higher education and certainly between higher ed and employers. So the more we can focus on that and not focus so much on, the duplication and why things shouldn't work, so that institutions can work together for the benefit of Maryland students, particularly for these 21st century jobs, the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is where I think I expect this, I mean, this line here between the analyst reviews concerns and the analyst meets with the proposing institutions, there's going to be additional conversations that are happening there, particularly with existing programs to better understand existing programs for the purposes of collaboration. Talking internally, I mean, this idea of collaboration and our agency making recommendations on really the technical aspects. So it's one thing to say, oh, well, you can share faculty. What does that actually mean? Certainly that merits an MOU, but are you now a faculty member of both campuses? There's got to be a monetary exchange. Is a student registering with their home campus? Are they registering with the collaboration campus? There are some real technical considerations that I am anxious to get into the weeds on with our colleges and really try to find on the ground solutions that, to your point, Chair Mott, supports our students and supports the needs of the state. So I think there's a lot that will happen between these two boxes. Okay. So again, just some next steps. This has been very helpful feedback. Thank you. Again, we're going to meet with the Program Review Process Advisory Council to garner feedback. We'll consider revisions as appropriate and bring this back to the Commission for your review and thoughts before we actually implement. We will need to prepare materials and guidance. So once we get a good handle of where we want to go with this process, we're going to have to prepare some guidance materials. We're going to present an update at an upcoming commission meeting. And this will all depend on when we can get a Program Review Process Advisory Council scheduled next. So I hesitate to commit to the January meeting. That is our ideal. But we may not be bringing this back to you until the February commission meeting, just because I want to make sure we get, as we have all just discussed, getting that input from the Program Review Process Advisory Council. So our hope is that we implement this process in spring 2025. We'll do the first round of this in spring. And then I'm committing to providing an implementation update to the Commission after we go through the first round of letters. After we've received those letters and we've reviewed them, we can come back and say, okay, here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's what we found, this is what this experience looked like. So that will likely be summer 2025. Questions, comments, concerns on next steps? Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
I just have a quick question. Is there an opportunity for MHEC to look at past programs that have come up for implementation that you could pull from to make a scenario to explain the process? Things that you know that work or things that you know that didn't work, that you could perhaps create a scenario for not only for us to learn, but also for the institutions to learn. Just a thought.
Thank you for that recommendation. We will put some thought into that to see if we can simulate what this would look like using a past proposal. Absolutely. Thank you.
Right. Simulate is a great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm referring back to our conversation, the presentation earlier on the cyber ranges.
I have a question. I want to make sure I'm not interrupting though.
Please, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm curious, consistent with what I shared at the last meeting around the minimum numbers, is there an opportunity as part of potentially the harm analysis to say, in the process guides that as a default, we will not consider anything that is serving fewer than X number of students a year, let's say, 20 to 50 students a year, who have any level of harm, or anything that will allow us to make sure that where we are spending the most time on these processes or for the programs that are really going to have a volume of students impacted. And again, this is coming from just my experience with very arduous processes for very small programs that I really struggle to think of, even where the duplication is clear, how can such a small number be causing demonstrable harm? So again, I know this is not in the legislation, but wondering if there's anything we can do in practice, whether related to minimum threshold, or even just that for the sake of clarity, that we don't move forward with an appeal process, that the commission would never change a decision made by MHEC through this process if it is below a certain threshold of students impacted.
Dr. Dow, before you answer, just for the record, that is Commissioner Tabor Stalen with that excellent question, since she's calling in by phone. Dr. Dow?
Thank you. A great point and noted. We would likely include that in our analysis around unreasonable duplication, and make that a criteria, or potentially make that a criteria of what would be unreasonable duplication that would cause harm to the student or state. So that is helpful feedback, and we will, I just noted that for inclusion in the next version of the draft for that analysis.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so on that note, related to letters of intent, I realize then we don't have in this potential section an item around kind of expected enrollment. It's hard to predict enrollment. We've seen programs that have said, oh, we think this is going to be a 20 to 30 person a year program, and it has blossomed into a 200 plus program. But nonetheless, we can still ask institutions for what they intend the program size to be as part of this potential section. Okay. Any other comments? So thank you, Commissioner Tabor-Stalen, for those comments. Noted, and we'll include them as we continue this work. Okay. Last update, third topic, mission statement review. This is limited to our public colleges and universities and our regional higher education centers. Per our statute, we are expected to do a mission statement review after we release the state plan for higher education. We are expected to release the next iteration of the state plan for higher education no later than July 1st, 2026. But in past conversations, and I'm channeling Vice Chair Agu, that you all want the state plan done by January 1st, 2026. Nonetheless, state plan for higher education, we're working on it through 2025, and we will release it in 2026. We then give the institutions, typically in past exercises, about 8 months to work through their internal processes, to revise their mission statement and align it with the most recent state plan for higher education. So we would do that 8 months after. We would review as required by statute and continue on with this process. 2026 seems close, but it's really far away. And we've got a lot of work that depends on institutional mission that we need to do in the meantime. And realistically, depending on when we get the next iteration of the state plan for higher education, We may not even be providing feedback to institutions around their revised mission statements until potentially 2027. So that kind of all makes us a little uneasy that is so far away. So what we are proposing is an interim solution where we would ask institutions to provide institutional distinction. And we have 3 prepared prompts that we would ask institutions to respond to. So we would set some criteria for that review of institutional distinction. We request institutions to provide those narratives. And then we would review and provide feedback summer, fall 2025. That way we can really start to better understand, particularly for our public 4-year institutions, how they see themselves in the broader ecosystem of higher education in Maryland. So we're proposing an interim review of institutional distinction for our public 4-year institutions. These are the 3 prompts that we would ask institutions to respond to. So 1, what makes your institution unique from other public 4-year institutions in Maryland? Where does your institution currently overlap with other, and I'm so sorry, that's a typo there, with other public 4-year institutions in Maryland? And elaborate and further define your institutional statutory distinction. We think that these 3 prompts will give us some base information about how an institution sees them as unique. This institutional distinction element is new to the mission statement review process and will get an early start on the mission review process prior to the next review process that depends on the state plan being released. So let me stop there. Oh no, I have one more slide, I'm so sorry. So some of the factors that we would want, so, it's one thing, I could imagine an institution getting these 3 prompts and being like, well, my institution is unique for these reasons. And another school says something about uniqueness that's completely different. So we would want to kind of narrow what they're talking about when they talk about uniqueness and overlapping. So certainly programmatic priorities, what kind of degrees you currently offer, are they research versus applied programs? What kind of academic departments do you have? Is there a focus? Do you have strategic plans for new program development that already exist as part of your institution's strategic development? We'd want them to focus on service areas and collaboration. So the student populations of focus, who they serve and who they target. The geographic area that they serve. We do have a couple of regional comprehensive universities, and so do they talk about the geographic area and not focus? And then priority institutions and community partners for collaboration, honing in on who they see their partners are, both within the state of Maryland and nationally. Again, we know some of our institutions have really strong relationships with out-of-state institutions and with national organizations to do the work that they do. So we would want to get some insight on those collaborations for the purposes of identifying uniqueness and institutional distinction. We'd want to know about their research priorities. This will also help inform our post-2025 goals. And then certainly any public service and community priorities, getting back to who they serve and why, and how does that impact or reflect their day-to-day operations. So let me stop there and see if you all have thoughts about this timeline, having us do an interim review around institutional distinction. How do you feel about these prompts and these potential factors that we would provide some guidance on to the institutions are focusing their answers for these prompts on those factors? Let me open that up for discussion, thoughts.
Dr. Dow, what did you say the intent of submitting these prompts to the institutions would be? What's hoped to be yielded by this?
Sure. Primarily for the purposes of academic program review, that would be one reason. In the interim, as you know, academic program review is supposed to be aligned with mission statement. And in the absent, we don't want to wait till we do the state plan and the mission review. So this will give us some interim information about institutional identity. Second, it will serve a purpose in helping inform our state plan. And if we can leverage that information to be included in the state plan and then help inform the post 2025 goals. So it serves, a handful of purposes, but first and foremost, academic program review and then state plan drafting.
Given that, I think it's a good set of questions that will afford institutions the opportunity to lay out their distinctiveness, which should be helpful to them.
Thank you. Commissioner Howe.
So on the number 2 question that you have here, where does each of the institutions go for research to determine whether or not all of their multitude of programs are overlapping with other public four-year institutions in Maryland?
So yeah, this is where we would want as they answer that question, focus in on what they know about existing programs on other campuses, what they know through publicly available material, what they know about existing research centers through publicly. We hope that this would also spark some conversation among presidents and senior leaders to say, hey, we think we are distinct in this way. Do you all think we're distinct in that way? I know that's asking a lot and that's a high hope expectation, but I would think that institutions, as they're responding to these questions, are talking with their counterparts to say, I think I'm different this way. What do you all think?
Okay, so, but the draft factors are ones that they're looking at for their own institution. Is that right?
Correct.
This is their own institution. So my question was, is there a way that they can look at all of the documents supplied by other institutions so they can do their comparison after the draft factors have been considered and filed?
I see your point. How could they answer 2 in the absence of knowing 1 from all the responses? So we can work to refine question 2 or potentially, let's think on that. I see your point.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. Nope, I see your point. Thank you for that feedback.
Dr. Dow, is this another area where you'll be asking for input from the program approval process committee?
Absolutely. Yes. Right. I do not have a next step slide because I wanted to make sure you all were okay with this first before we really started digging deep into presenting, into kind of furthering this and fleshing this out a little bit more. But absolutely, not only the Program Review Process Advisory Council, but also our Segmental Advisory Council as segmental leaders. So definitely 2 existing councils that we would want their input on. So if there are not concerns with us proceeding this way, we will continue to work on this, refine some of these prompts so that they're a bit clearer. We'll start to circulate this among the higher ed community for feedback, and then we'll come back to you again. This will most likely be in a February commission meeting for updates and next steps and kind of a concrete proposal on how we proceed with this. Okay. That is the end of my presentation. This has been a helpful discussion and appreciate everyone's feedback. Secretary Ryan.
So, Chair Watts, I want to thank Dr. Dow and MHEC team. It's a tremendous amount of work. Bill was passed just this year's session, and you can see that there are tremendous requirements, and a number of things have timelines. Assembly has to be notified by this date, and Dr. Dow and our team has met those deadlines, and General Assembly has released the funds that they had withheld. So it's a tremendous amount of work. I will also say that while this work was going on, in the last 18 months, our team has approved almost 150 academic programs. Think about that. While this work is being done with the existing process, almost 150 academic programs have been approved. The other thought is certainly this process will bring more clarity and certainly more transparency, and it's more structured process as we implement the new one. Often we are concerned, for all good reasons, that our high demand jobs, our emerging areas must be addressed. You all passed a program modification process now, where an institution can change an existing program by 50% without coming to Maryland Higher Education Commission. So I think that's another thing that institutions can take advantage in serving the emerging areas and high demand needs through that process as well. And we want more and more institutions to take advantage of that process. Thank you again.
Well, thank you, Secretary Rai and Dr. Dow and the whole MHEC team. I agree, this has been an extraordinary amount of work in a short period of time. And program review is just one small piece of what MHEC does. It is a relatively small state agency, only 70 people or so. They run the entire state financial aid system. They do the program. There are just so many things that you all do and do well. And I think this is an example of where the agency really stepped up and worked consistently hard throughout the summer and fall to get this right and meet those legislative deadlines. So congratulations and thank you to the whole team at MHEC. Going back to our agenda, the last item is a review of an NC-SARA participation appeal. NC-SARA stands for the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements. And it was formed to coordinate the regulation of distance education programs to ensure consistency among the states. Maryland, like 49 of the states, is a member, as well as the District of Columbia. The only state that's not a member is California. And as required by NC-SARA, our Maryland General Assembly authorized Maryland's participation back in 2015 to participate in NC-SARA to be administered by MHEC. And so MHEC back in 2015 issued regulations governing participation by Maryland higher education institutions at COMAR, specifically COMAR 13B.0205 in December of 2015. This particular appeal relates to the administration of the existing law relating to NC-SARA, that is Education Article 11-105N3, and an existing regulation, COMAR 13B.02.05. Because what we're about to be asked to do relates to the administration of an existing law as opposed to the development of a new policy, this particular part of the meeting is not subject to the Open Meetings Act. Again, the legal site is the Annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions 3.103. So that is just a long way of saying that this is a part of what our commission does, that we do just as a commission guided by our counsel, Assistant Attorney General Kimberly Ward, that's not in open session. There will be nobody from the agency or from institutions of higher education present. So we will adjourn to a different Google Meet link that has been sent out this morning, just the commissioners and Ms. Ward, and this public part of the meeting is adjourned. Do we have a motion to adjourn this part of the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Howe, and, or sorry, Commissioner Burnham and Commissioner Howe. I saw you raise your hand as a second. This part of the meeting is adjourned, and we will go to the non-public part for this appeal, because as I said, we are administering a law and it will not be an open session. So thank you all. Happy holidays, and we will see you in January 2025.